Sabrina and Prete, thank you so much for joining us today as Limitless, part of our series of interviews of successful women in business and technology.
Thank you, Ruth. It's great to be here.
Now, Sabrina, I know you've had a hugely successful career in the financial services industry. You've worked for the Coutts Bank, you've been MD of Williams & Glyn. You've now created and started your own startup in Fintech. That's quite a departure from a very traditional organisation into a very dynamic and fast-paced environment. Firstly, tell me about why did you get into financial services?
I suppose when I started my career, financial services was a secure place to be. You know, as I came from Italy, I aspired to have a secure and stable career in a professional world, and the expectation was that you would be either in finance or a doctor or some kind of profession that was reputed, acceptable at least in my country. So I don't know how much it was a free choice or rather a choice of the environment where I was at that time. But I enjoyed it. I suppose whatever you do, you bring your energy, your enthusiasm, and your passion. And I think I had tremendous fun being financial services, especially in London, which is a very dynamic place to be.
So how many role models did you have in that industry? Because it is quite male-dominated, but there are many women who have been successful in financial services, as you have demonstrated. Were there many women in successful positions, and who were your role models and advocates?
Unfortunately, sadly, the answer is no. There were not many role models. I had a wonderful boss who was a woman, and she struggled, and after a while she left. So that was not really the role model I wanted to aspire to, because I thought it cannot be so difficult. I think in a certain way, it was a matter of me having an attitude that was about what I call the bring it on model. You know, bring it on. I can put up with that. And I think there were many fights. I don't think there were many female role models, but I had some amazing men that sponsored me through my career. Not often, but it's very, very important to have somebody in senior management that can see that there is some talent and wants to support and eliminate barriers for a woman. That's essential.
It's great that you, in your career, you've identified that you have had some male role models, and I think all the women who we have spoken to as part of this series have shared themselves that not only were they looking for female role models, but some of the males they worked with were great advocates of women in their industry. We don't see enough of that, but do you think it's time for more men to come forward in that type of inspirational role?
For men to come forward? Definitely. I think both the female and the male are important. The women needs to show to other women that it's possible to be there, that you can be a mother and be a person with a career, that you can be a wife and still be able to do your job properly. So I think it's so important. It was so important for me. I was so hungry of really being able to see a woman I could aspire to be when I was younger. But at the same time, men are absolutely essential. I remember once having a conversation with actually one of the men that sponsored me throughout my career, and is still a great mentor. And he had this idea that he wanted women to have mentors. So Sabrina will enroll you in this mentoring program. And I remember being around a table with lots of very senior people and mostly men, and saying, I don't want to be mentored. I've been mentored for a long time. I want to be sponsored. Are you guys ready to go the extra step and sponsor me? And there was silence. You know, it was like, mentoring is a bit patronizing sometimes. I'm going to tell you all the things that you should do or how you should do things differently. But sponsoring requires an active involvement of the person that has got the power. And that person is there to eliminate barriers for you. And I must say, this particular gentleman completely got the point. And probably was a moment that did change my career, and hopefully that of many other women that came after me.
That's a wonderful point that you make, that distinction between mentorship, which is slightly more passive, and pastoral, versus the sponsorship, which is very active and participative.
Definitely.
I love that, and I think it's something that we would welcome of taking away. So you were in professionals in the financial services sector. working in operations and fixing things and solving problems, which you're describing and bring it on.
Yes.
What obstacles did you experience?
Oh, a long list. Okay, the first is at the beginning was about being taken seriously. Because you're young, because you're a woman, because you're Italian, there is an assumption that you will fulfill a role that is predefined for you. And that is a moment of frustration. Is also a moment where I think, mostly as women, we are in a lose-lose situation. Because if you do speak up, if you have a point of view, generally you're considered aggressive or loud or something like this. So I think I never really went over the issue of that fine line between being assertive and aggressive. I think men don't see that very often, and women also. So I think main difficulties were about being able to handle the conversation with my colleagues in a way where my opinions could be taken seriously without being always having to be challenged. I think other difficulties were probably personal. I found it extremely difficult to be a mum and somebody with a career, and I was so determined to ensure that I could do both. And I think I nearly lost my health. It was really, really difficult. But I found a way. And I think I'm so much stronger for that. So I'm so happy I managed to do both.
When you say you found a way, can you give an indication as to was there trade-offs or what was that way? Because there'll be many people who listen to this and think, I'm in that same situation. A bit of insightful.
Well, you do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is a bit of practical advice I got from one of my colleagues at the beginning who says, just get all the help you can. Any help you can, just ask everybody, invest in childcare, beg your husband, speak with your mother-in-law. At the beginning, in the first years, mostly is about finding practical help and being able to ask for it. And it's absolutely fine. It's incredible how people respond well, where you say, I really have to go to the business meeting, I really have to go to the travel abroad, can you help me? And I found that an incredible group of people, even one I didn't expect, would be there for me, who actually did help in the first few years. And I invested a lot in childcare too. Later on, it was about really very much involving my children in what I do. So not creating the separation, the black box of mommy going to work, you don't know exactly what she's going to do, but I know it's bothering me because I would like her to be here doing the homework with me. So I think the children are now teenagers. They are very much involved with what I do. I speak to them about my deadlines, my worry, my concern, but also my success and my excitement. So we are a team. And I do have the conversation with them where I say, hey guys, I cannot be here to cook tonight. Because I'm an Italian mom, so I do the cooking, obviously. But you know what? You're old enough, you'll do it. We are a team, you're free. And they respond very nicely to that.
It's wonderful. It's great to hear that you had the courage to ask for help. And I say courage because many of the women who we talk to feel a responsibility to be all things to all people and to have a career and be at home and be that very visible person and do all of the majority of chores, etc. But you're saying be unashamed about that. Just ask for help in work and as much as home life as well.
That's correct, yeah.
And then I love the analogy you say about it's almost like you manage your home life in the same way as you manage your business. It's like involve the family. It's everyone's responsibility, right? But you're also saying that you share the success. It's not just the pressures.
That's right. In fact, actually, I must say the pressure and then probably they don't see so much of that. That is already sheltered by that as much as possible. But they will know if I've got something to do that is taking my time and why I'm not there that day. They understand. It's incredible how much the family can be supportive as long as you explain to them what's going on.
Indeed. So the financial services sector, obviously, I think most of us will recall in 2008, 2009, the global crisis and the crash of the financial services sector. You worked through that period.
Yeah.
That must have been quite challenging, the financial services industry, long hours, lots of pressure, etc. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And was that different for a woman in that environment at that time?
It was worse for a woman. I found it really, really difficult. So I was in investment banking when investment banking was booming, and there was lots of space for everybody. And therefore, there was lots of space for women too. Of course, it was more difficult. Of course, there was, you can imagine, early 90s, the culture was so different. But there was enough space that if you really were relentless and wanted to get things done, you had a chance. When the crisis happened, I think we saw an industry that was on the defensive. And the cost cutting started happening, the redundancy. The industry stopped looking for growth and they started looking for a defense position. And my experience to the period is that if you are a woman or any minority really, you tend to be more vulnerable, because when there are less opportunities, in my experience, they go to the people that hold the majority of power, or the people that look like them, or part of the club. So I found it extremely challenging. Yeah,
a tough environment economically as well as a working environment. So we move forward to present day, having had a very established career in investment banking in a very traditional and, as you say, to an extent, quite safe pre-crisis. But that gives you some really good grounding and really good visibility into the network of how banks work, some of their fragility, some of the systems that perhaps aren't as robust as they could be. You've gone into fintech and you've started your own startup.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that, because that's really quite exciting and inspiring to anybody who's thinking about taking that brave step.
So I think I told you this expression the other day. I went behind enemy lines, right? Is in financial services, you tend to think about two different words, incumbent and fintech. Actually, the two go very well together sometimes. But I decided to really have a go at doing something different. I was also privileged because I was at a point in my career where I could afford it. I'd done my career. I could afford it in so many different ways, both financially, because I built my security over time, but also because I kind of proved what I wanted to prove. I worked my way. My last job was as a member of the executive committee of a bank. I was the chief digital transformation officer, and I thought, okay, now we can have some fun. And being a fintech entrepreneur is the most fun things I've ever done. Is also the most terrifying.
Oh, wow.
And I learned that the two can really go together. You have this moment where you really have the electricity and the energy and things move finally at the speed that you really wanted. At the same time, it's a constant, the word is really, you're terrified in most cases, because everything you do as a consequence, because you can't take decision, but then it's your responsibility, because you are selling a dream to your team and to your potential clients and investors, and actually there's nowhere to hide. It's going to be you. For me, that is a fantastic opportunity. I'm so glad I have taken it.
Mm-hmm. So you were sharing with me on one occasion when we were speaking about going on the investment circuit and raising funds, etc. And you're very experienced in that, so you know the pitfalls to look out for. But you did have shared with me that being a woman, you've been treated differently.
Yes,
and there's an expectation that you don't quite know everything, so maybe the wool can be pulled over your eyes, etc. So tell us a little bit about that, because I was shocked when I heard that.
Yes.
But then when you explained it to me, I probably wasn't surprised. But this is your baby, this is your startup.
That's right. It's my baby, my startup, and everybody thinks that they know best. And to be honest, it's not a problem, because I lived through that for 25 plus years. The attitude doesn't change. What changes is my freedom to choose who I'm speaking with. So when I was in a corporate environment, there was not so much flexibility to say, you know what, I don't really like you, I don't need to speak with you, fine. Now, I had to conform with the hierarchy and the way that the bank was organized. But as an entrepreneur, you got much more freedom. And what I found out is I have been so lucky because, especially to the capital raising, I have managed to find investors and supporters and people that are part of my advisory board with whom actually I can have a very strong and fulfilling relationship. And I chose them and they chose me. And it's wonderful. And there are lots of people there that maybe I've also tried to tell me what to do, but it is in a very positive and enriching way for everybody. So I found that there is much more freedom. There is more risk, but there is also more freedom in my position. So I managed to decide who I interact with, even if maybe it means I'm going to miss an opportunity. Maybe that investor won't follow me, but maybe it's not one I want to have. So that's okay.
That must be very liberating.
Liberating.
Yeah, and what I find interesting is you've had a hugely successful career, and people will look at you and probably hear this interview and think, gosh, that's hugely brave and very inspiring. But you've also shown me that you still tap into the conversations with your previous mentors. You've stayed with them and they've stayed with you throughout your career. You're still speaking to them about guidance and advice even today, 25 years later.
Yes, I must say there have been people in my career that have been absolutely pivotal. So my main mentor, who is also helping me tremendously with my company, I met more than 15 years ago. And I think the important thing, when you find somebody that is willing to share their experience, has the generosity to give you time and to also be quite personal about their own experiences, I think that's really valuable. So if there is a message I'd like to give to maybe younger women that are coming through the ranks now, is find those people that can be there for you, that have gone through life, and they will have picked up some personal wisdom, and if they can pass them on, if they are willing to pass them on, they're going to make your life so much easier. So despite I spoke about sponsoring and mentorship, right, genuine mentorship is a great gift. You find a person or those people, just stick with them.
And then they're the ones who've got that generosity of as you said, that insight.
And then there's the other side, is then you have to give. Of course, if you understand how important it is to find somebody that said, yes, let me tell you how I went through this. So let's talk together about this problem. And let me show you another point of view. And those are the kind of sentences you have to look for. Look for that, listen. But then you have to give, you have to do the same. And especially if you are a woman, and you had a career and you had a position that maybe can be inspiring for other women, you have such a great responsibility of being visible, as you were saying before, and be generous with your time, with your availability.
So you're super busy, successful career, new startup, teenage family,
yes,
also being at events and speaking and mentoring, etc. But you've also found time to be a non-executive director, and I'm really keen to hear about your experiences of gaining boardroom level opportunities. We have spoken today in our forum about glass ceilings and how women can help one another.
Yeah.
But what was your experience of actually getting your first and second boardroom appointments?
So getting a board appointment is incredibly difficult. And the first one is incredibly difficult because we still live in an organization, in a culture where nobody wants to take risk. So once you have your first appointment, then obviously it's less risky to present your second or third opportunity. So my first, I actually, at the moment, I have a board appointment. I don't have the time to take another one on, but they come, there are lots of opportunities that come up all the time. For me, it was very important because I wanted to have exposure to a sector that was not financial services, that was not only banking. So I have a board position in a university. And I think that being exposed to another way to think, to another way to to reason and different objectives and goals. It's really interesting. You know, I always try to go outside the confines of my close environment and trying to find people that come from different backgrounds, have different opinions, because I just found that makes me more effective in life.
It's interesting that you're demonstrating your continuous learning. What advice would you have given your younger self?
I would say to my younger self to always look in the long term. You know, that's something so important. When I was younger, I could see lots of people winning. You know, there was so many situations where I thought, oh, I'm such a loser. You know, that trader maybe didn't have the best ethic, you know, that won. The other guy got the promotion, and so on. And then I noticed that there is a wonderful karma in business where actually in the long term, things tend to be fairer. So if in a certain way there is an element of trust in your career and how the career evolves, don't worry about the short-term defeats. Be quite in line with your principles. People will recognize that. Build a network of people that recognize that. And in the long term, the network will support you and you will be winning, not them.
I love that. And it does talk about ethics in business.
Yes.
And something that we have seen lacking over the decades and one would hope is coming back now. Sabrina, thank you so much for your generosity today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you.
Thank you so much, everyone.